So this video is not one of high great spirits, so I'm not going to really do my normal intro. And this video has actually been something that I've wanted to talk about for a very long time, but due to recent events, I decided that, it's finally time for me to speak up. And basically, I no longer am going to have a relationship with my dad at all.
Hey y'all, so before I get this video started, let me give a quick shout out. These were the first 3 comments in my last video. If you want to be featured in my next video, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell and come show me some love when I drop a new video.
Hey guys, so this video is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time, especially when I was like really at the peak of my career in network marketing, because you get so many people who talk to you about their problems, their life issues, going through depression and anxiety and just all around just life. And it's always been that thing where I just felt like I could not talk about because I was really just putting other people before myself. I was trying to protect the image of my dad, not just because he is a figure in the community, in the real estate community, but also just because I never wanted anyone to look at my parents as monsters because of what I've gone through as a child. But after recent events, as of this past Sunday, due to things that were said, due to things that were done, I am done. And I won't really get into that particular event that happened on Sunday in great detail just yet, just because there are certain details that I would have to omit for privacy issues for right now. But when things are a little bit more public, then I can talk about them. But just know that on Sunday, my dad really showed who he really was, which is something that I really always felt like he was in the first place, which is a liar, a manipulator, and just an overall not so great person. He threw a situation of abuse, which I'm going to talk about in this video, in my face on Sunday, and basically just said, so what, I did such and such when you were a kid, so what? He called my tears fake, my crying fake. He said I was fake. And it just was a lot. And I didn't do my makeup in this. Well, y'all know I hate coming on camera with makeup anyway, because I'm just not that person. But I really didn't do it because I just feel like that even though I've moved past everything that happened on Sunday, going back and talking about things will probably make me cry. And it's pointless to cry with makeup because then you just F it all up anyway. So let's get into it. So I felt like this video was really important because so many people who follow me on social media, and even like family, friends, people that just follow me or know me in real life, they've always had this facade or this thought pattern of, oh my God, I wish I had a family like that, or oh my God, I wish I had that type of relationship with my dad, and just different things like that. And I'm not gonna say that my relationship with my dad has always been horrible. We've had good times. I'm not gonna say great, but we've had good times. But if I can be completely honest, I never really liked my dad. Ever. My dad has contributed the most to my depression, to my anxiety, to my suicidal ideation, to my panic attacks, to my self-esteem issues that I have had. And it's really messed up. And I feel like it really sucks that the people that are in the generations of my parents, my grandparents, all of that, I don't know if it's just because them growing up in a toxic environment, not everybody, of course, but, you know, maybe them just feeling like, oh, well, you know, it happened to me, so what? Like, so what if I put that on my kids? I don't know. I don't know. So let's start from the beginning. So my dad shared with me a couple of years ago, a couple of summers ago, that before my sister was born, I was like so happy and, you know, all of this other stuff or whatever. And he said that when my sister was born, my whole attitude, my whole demeanor, everything just changed. And the thing is, I was only 2.5 years old when my sister was born. And part of like my personality being independent, like a lot of things that people aspire or like are inspired by me with, like my personality, my drive and stuff like that, you know, they want that, but they don't understand where it comes from. And sometimes when you understand what certain personality traits come from in people, then it's like, if you had to go through the same thing, I don't think you would want to go through that just to have that particular trait. So my dad and even like my grandma and mom would always talk about how like I just wanted to be so independent so early. And from their perspective, from their eyes, I just wanted to be independent. But from my eyes and my experience and how I interpreted things and how things went on, it was mainly because of emotional and mental neglect. My sister was born when I was 2.5. She was born premature. She had to have a particular surgery. She had hydrocephaly, which means like water or fluid on the brain. She had to have a shunt. She was in the NICU, I think, for 2 months. I think she was 2 months premature, if I'm not mistaken. She was born in December, and I think she was supposed to be born early February. So maybe like not a total 2 months early, maybe like 6 weeks. She spent time in the NICU moving forward. My dad did talk about how like when my sister came home, like it was like I wanted to be her mom. Like I just wanted to do everything. I don't really remember back that far. But what I do always remember is that I always felt like I was second. I always felt like I didn't matter. See, look, I'm about to cry. And I told myself I'm not gonna cry about like me and my dad not having a relationship anymore, but just talking about some of the things that have affect me, right? So yeah, I just always felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like I didn't matter because they just, and my mom is included, but I don't have an issue with my mom. Me and my mom have talked it out. She's apologized, and not just apologized with words, but with behavior. I was never the kid that never spoke up about things. I spoke up about things. And so I feel like, and this is even in relationships, you know, intimate relationships, I just feel like when you speak up about things that bother you, things that affect you negatively, if somebody continues to do it, then they just don't give a damn. And that's how I feel about my dad. So anyway, I've already told you guys different stories on my channel about how my dad has helped me with my credit, you know, co-signed on things, you know, things like that, like parental responsibilities that not everybody does, but some people do. My dad was physically there, but he was never mentally or emotionally there. And that is an issue within itself. I'm not going to talk about how my dad grew up because I have no idea. Every time I've tried to talk to him to get him to open up so that I can understand him, he just made jokes. Like I remember a couple of months ago, I was like, Dad, you know, did you ever deal with any traumas growing up like that made you who you are? And he was like, well, you know, that one time your Uncle D, he stuck me with a diaper pin when he was changing my diaper when I was like 2. Like he just takes things as jokes. I don't know if it's because as how most men are, they don't like to open up. I don't know. I really don't care because I just feel like what you deal with growing up, you have the ability to decide how you're going to use that. You can use it to hurt people, or you can use it to say, you know what, I don't want to instill that in the people in my life. And you just keep it moving. So I primarily spent a lot of time at my dad's mother's house growing up because my sister didn't like going over there. She hated it. And I loved it because not only did I just absolutely love my grandmother and her husband, but because I was the only one there, I always got the attention there that I did not get at home. So I felt loved. I felt all of that. And when my grandmother died when I was 10 years old, I just became really depressed. For 9 years, I dealt with depression. I dealt with a lot of anxiety. I used to have panic attacks like in my sleep, waking up, just feeling like I couldn't breathe. And it just was really bad because I had to watch her disintegrate, like literally. She had pancreatic cancer and she died about 2.5 years after she was diagnosed. So it wasn't anything fast. And I think sometimes the slower deaths are just as bad as the fast ones because you literally watch somebody get really, really bad. I became suicidal because I just felt like the one person that I never had to question their love for me was gone. And this is not to like take away from my mom or take away from my mother's mom or her dad or anything like that. It's just at that particular time in my life, I had a really, really close bond with my Nana. I did have a very close bond with my grandparents on my mother's side as well. So don't get that twisted. So I think a lot of the depression and everything just came from the fact that I had to go back to spending all of my time in a house where I didn't feel loved a lot because I was always second. Yeah, I just always felt like I was second. One of the things that my dad used to do that really bothered me, and he actually laughed about it in Sunday's incident and basically kind of threw his hands up as if it was like, whatever, like that's what, and he literally said, that's what you're mad about. I remember growing up, I was a straight A student for the most part. Whenever I would get B's, I would literally cry. Like, literally. Even to the point where, like, I was very intelligent. I graduated high school at 16. I had a 4.13 GPA. I graduated like 13 out of 673 students. And I barely took honors classes. I was a student athlete. I was one of the top athletes in the city, in my school, all of that. But I remember growing up that, like, when we would get our report cards, my sister would give my dad her report card. He would literally stop the TV, look at her grades, high five her, hug her, good job, kid, those kind of things. And when it would come to me, he would literally do this. Oh, good job. And some people, like, one thing I want to say before I continue is don't minimize people's traumas, people's feelings about different things that have gone on in their life, because you might have gone through things that were absolutely worse, and I'm sorry that you have, but how you internalize different things, different experiences are different for different people. Some people might be like, so what? My parents never looked at my grades either. But for me, it just was always a blatant difference in how my sister and I were treated. So that really affected me because I just felt like, damn, I don't matter. I really don't matter. My grades are better than this person over here. My sister, she got good grades too. She wasn't no like C student or like flunked out and like that. But it was just like, I get the better grades and it doesn't matter. Damn. So fast forward to a particular incident that really affected me very hard, and I feel like at this particular time is when I really just started to really despise my dad. So I'm almost certain it was when I was 14. I was in the 10th grade and we had a half day that day, and my sister was still in grade school. She was in 6th grade, so we're 2.5 years apart, but we were always like 4 or 5 grades apart because I skipped kindergarten, and then she was held back because our birthday's in December. I don't know if they still do that nowadays, but they did back then. So we just automatically 4 years, boom. So I remember walking to the school to go pick her up, and the way that our school was, like from our house, there was practically 2 or 3 different ways that you could walk to get to our elementary school. So I decided to go through the adjacent neighborhood, and when I got to the top of the hill, I seen one of my childhood friends. Her name is Erin, and I remember that we were so early to pick up our siblings. Her brother was in the same grade as my sister, and they actually were friends growing up. And she was like, hey, we're kind of early, so you want to just come back to my house and chill until the kids got out of school? I'm like, sure. So this particular day, I had no idea, but a girl that lived at the top of the neighborhood, she had a house party at her house. The back of her house lets out into like the neighborhood park. I didn't know about the party. I didn't go to the party. Even at 29 years old, I don't even go to parties. I don't party. I rarely drink. I don't do any of that. I don't go clubbing. I don't do anything like at all. But anyway, so she told me that this guy who went to 9th grade with us, who no longer went to our school, was in town. And so she was like, oh, we could go say hi, like blah, blah, blah. He'll stop at the house, whatever. So we were just chilling, and then it was like, oh shoot, we gotta go pick our siblings up. Fine. So I'm at the top of the neighborhood, and at this point in time, I'm on the main street, like where all the kids would be coming down. But again, there's 2 or 3 different ways to walk to our house from our elementary. So after like all these kids are coming by, it's like, okay, where my sister at? So I remember asking one of my childhood friends, who actually is a cousin of my cousin. We didn't find that out until years ago. But I was like, hey, have you seen my sister? And she was like, oh, I seen her walk home with Ashley. Ashley is my childhood friend of 20 years. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, instead of me walking all the way back down to my house to figure out if my sister was there, I asked Erin if I could come to her house so I could call my parents to make sure my sister made it home before I walk all the way home, and then she's not even there, and then I still have to go out and find her. So I called home, and I was like, hey, and my dad was like, where are you at? I said, I went to pick up Ari, and I can't find her, but somebody told me that she walked home with Ashley. Is she home? Yes, she's home. Where are you at? Where are you at? And I'm like, I'm at Erin's house. Now, I would say about a year or 2 ago, when I started harping on the situation again, because it's just something where when somebody continues to affect you negatively, you start thinking about all the things that they've done to affect you negatively. And so when I started thinking about at 14, as a 27-year-old, 28-year-old, I'm like, you know what? In hindsight, he probably thought Aaron was a boy. But I didn't think anything of it because my mother, who was more involved with my life and more involved in my schooling and stuff like that. And by the way, I've lived with my parents, both my parents in the household my entire life. But yeah, in hindsight, I felt like maybe he thought Aaron was a boy. I'm not really sure. But he was like, well, where are you at? I said, well, I'll just walk up to the top of the neighborhood. And he was like, all right, stay there. I'm going to pick you up. I'm like, all right. So I get to the top of the neighborhood, and I'm waiting on my dad to come pick me up in his car, of course. And a bunch of kids start coming out of this house. Again, I had no idea it was a house party. I never knew about house parties because I didn't go to them. So I remember getting in the car, and my dad was like, where have you been? I'm like, I told you I was at Erin's house. I went to go get Kiara. She never came. So I went back to Erin's house to use her phone to call because I didn't have a cell phone at the time. And he was like, so you was with some boy? I'm like, no, I was with Erin. And he was like, no, you had to be with some boy because I just drove up as I was driving up, you know, all these kids start coming out of this house. Like, was you with all these kids? I'm like, no, I don't even know where those kids came from. And he proceeded to tell me I was lying. He grabbed me by my hair, And in the midst of doing that, threw my head up against the car window. And I just remember thinking to myself, what did I do wrong? And you're talking about somebody, I didn't even get whoopings. I didn't get punishment. I didn't get grounded. I didn't get any of that. Because I was a good kid. I had a smart mouth sometimes. Because I was just too smart for my own good. But I was a good kid. So to not even get whoopings and to have something like that happen was really traumatic. And I remember when we got home, when I got out the car, he threw me up against the car. Probably one of the reasons why I have a bad back. My back is horrible. And that was that. I just remember hating him and feeling like the person that's supposed to protect me is not. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my best friend Ashley. I didn't tell my grandma. I didn't tell my grandpa. I didn't tell anybody. My anxiety attacks, my panic attacks, the depression got worse. The suicidal thoughts got worse. And I remember the only reason at this point that I didn't commit suicide is because shortly after this happened, my cousin killed himself. He was 21. And he was my favorite cousin. And I don't think he knew that. He was on my dad's side. We weren't, we didn't see them all the time like I saw my cousins on my mom's side all the time. But he was my favorite cousin. I just remember thinking to myself how he probably never knew how much I loved him. And I remember how I was affected by it. And how his siblings and how his mom were affected by it. And I just told myself that I couldn't put my mom through that, or my grandma. And to be honest with you, still to this day, when I do have suicidal thoughts, my cousin killing himself and remembering how I felt is the only reason why I haven't. So yeah, after that particular situation, I just really despised him. Like I said, I never told anybody about it until a couple years ago. I think I told my mom when I was living in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, which was back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. No, 2013, I think, is when I moved there at the end of 2013. I think I told her in like the summer of 14. And she was just like, why didn't you tell me? And I just said, I didn't think that you would say or do anything about it, so why would I tell you? But that really affected me a lot. There was a particular situation that happened not too long after, like maybe a year or so later. And I'm not going to get into specifics of that because that's not my story to tell. But he treated my sister a whole lot different when the circumstances were a lot different. He did that to me because he thought I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to do. Even after explaining to him that I didn't. And seeing the difference in how he handled the situation with my sister versus me really frustrated me. Not that I wanted her to get abused, but it was just like, he claimed last September that he whooped her. I don't believe so, to be honest. So, fast forward to when I was 19. By this time, I had been in my third year of college. I had one college diploma already, and I remember that I was about to go into nursing school. And moving back home just brought back a whole lot more issues, because I felt like every time I moved away, I felt amazing because I was on my own. I didn't have to be in the face of people who hurt me, people who made me feel less than. And I decided to write this letter, a very long letter, and reveal to my parents about my depression, my anxiety, my panic attacks, my suicidal thoughts. And I remember my dad looked me in my eyes and told me that I had no reason to be depressed, no reason to be suicidal, because I had a roof over my head and food in my belly. And that was the dumbest thing that he had ever heard. And that broke me. Because here it was, I was trying to get help. And it didn't matter. I always felt like growing up, like I was my dad's trophy. He always talked about how, like, the reason why he didn't interact with me a lot is because I would always tell him I didn't want him to play with me, get away from me. I remember growing up that some of my family members would call me mean and evil. Nobody ever asked me why I was upset, why I was angry. Nobody. The real reason why I used to always tell my dad to get away from me, even before the whole thing with him grabbing me by my hair and giving me this bruise and lump in my head, was because he spent so much time playing with my sister and interacting with her that I felt like I didn't want her sloppy seconds. I felt like I didn't want to get that 1% that was left of you after you interacted with her so much. You could keep it. But yeah, after that situation, I was just really broken. I was very angry all the time. All the time. I was very aggressive all the time. And it was just because I was just so upset and having to continue to deal with my dad. And a lot of things I kept from my mom for a long time because I didn't want to feel like if I said something and she approached him about it, I didn't want it to affect their relationship to where they wouldn't be together anymore because of me. Because she stuck up for me. And quite frankly, sometimes I just felt like she wouldn't say anything anyway. So I dealt with a lot of things on my own. And I remember back when I was really big in Wake Up Now, that some of my mentors would just tell me, like, you're in your own way. Like, you can't be going off on people and doing this and doing that. And I didn't give a damn. I wanted to say what I wanted to say, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I remember before I helped to start the company that I helped to start, that I'm no longer associated with in that aspect, I remember the CEO of the company saying, listen, you're going to have to mend things with your dad because the way that you go about things are going to bring you down in the long run. And I was just like, no, absolutely not. Because if I have a conversation with him and he denies things, I know it's going to drive me even more crazy. So I just rather leave it where it is and move on with my life. Eventually, I did have a conversation with him. And at that time, he was still denying a lot of things. He would still blame things on my mom. He would always talk about how my mom treated me and my sister different, but he could never admit to what he was doing. A lot of things he just flat out lied and said didn't happen. And it really used to frustrate me because it would make me question if things actually happened or not. And it's like, why would I hold on to some trauma that never happened? And the reason why I said that I always felt like I was his trophy is because, like, he would go around bragging to people about my grades, but these were the same grades he refused to look at. And I remember when I said something to him a couple weeks or a month or something ago about that, he said, well, you always brought home A's. What was the point? It was like for a long time I would make excuses for my dad because, you know, parenting doesn't come with a manual. And I really thought that my dad wasn't doing things maliciously or purposely. But after the situation that happened Sunday, and I will do a story time about that, I know he did it on purpose. I know he did. And these same grades he refused to look at, he would tell people about and brag about it. You didn't help me with homework. You wouldn't even look at my grades. Even when it came to sports, he's the reason that I started playing sports. My very first year of basketball, I do remember he took me to the majority of my practices because it was a sport he wanted me to play. After that, I could probably count on one hand, and I've been playing basketball since I was 7. I played basketball from age 7 to 20. I can count on one hand how many practices he took me to past that first year. He came to games, so did everybody else. But he would brag about my sports and post articles at his desk and stuff, and it's like, but you're bragging about something that you had no doing in. Don't get me wrong, he would take us in the backyard sometimes, play basketball on our hoop. But where I got good was in practice, and he wasn't there. And he would make excuses. He just made excuses in Sunday's conversation. Like, that was many a times I went up the road to Columbia 100 miles away to one of your basketball games. Okay, but what about when we were in North Carolina, when we were in Arkansas, when we were in all of these places for tournaments, and you weren't there? And you had the career where you had the ability to say, hey, listen, my child is going to be in such and such city this weekend. I'm going to watch her play. My mom was at everything. And you know, back then, we ain't fly. Ain't no extra cost because you're there. Besides maybe the tournament fee of getting in. But yeah, I was that kid that he could brag about, but he didn't spend any time with me with any of it. I did not feel loved as a kid. And, you know, a lot of things that my dad felt was love was not love. And I've had this conversation with him the last time on Sunday. Y'all, like, when I say I'm not having a relationship with him, I told him on Sunday, we live in the same house. I told him that I could be cordial, you know, hi and bye, because I'm going to respect you because this is your house. But I haven't said a word to him since Sunday. It's Friday. Not one word. And I'm actually feeling very good about it because I don't have to deal with fake shit anymore. I don't have to deal with fake interactions. Like, to him, love is, do you know how much money I spent for you to play basketball? Guys, listen. Parents, listen. Do not equate love to money. Your kids don't care about that, I promise. I promise. What good was you spending money for me to go to a basketball tournament in Chicago if you weren't there? And you had the ability to be there. What good was that? Love to him was his favorite line. You got a roof over your head and food in your belly. You never went without. That's not love. That's responsibility. When you decide to become a husband, when you decided to become a father, that was your responsibility. Does everybody uphold their responsibility? Absolutely not. There are trash parents out there. So kudos, you upheld your responsibility, but that's not love. Food in my belly, I can pay for my own food. I've been able to pay for my own food for a long time. Long time. A stranger in a drive-thru can pay for my food before I come up there. That don't mean they love me. He's never been affectionate with me. And I used to just think that it was because he wasn't affectionate, but he was very affectionate with my sister. And according to him, it's because my sister was affectionate to him. He brought up Sunday, how many times have you come to me and hugged me and kissed me just out of nowhere? I said never, because I never felt like yours was genuine anyway. His version of affection is when he comes in the house and when he leaves the house, he comes and gives you this little peck on your forehead and a little church hug. You can say that. I've never really been able to have many conversations with my dad because outside of sports, real estate, which is his career, and his health, because I'm a nurse, I can't even have conversations with him. They never last. Y'all, a couple of weeks ago, it was a Sunday, I was FaceTiming my friend and trading partner. We were studying the markets, studying the charts before the markets opened. My dad came in and said, "You can't make money on the weekends, can you?" I'm like, "Nah. I mean, you can, but at the time we were looking, you couldn't." I said, "No, we're just studying." He laughed and said, "Stop it." But you know what? The minute I become something in the trading arena, it'll be the first thing that he does is brag about me trading and how successful I am with it. But this is the same person who told me to stop studying. This is just him. On Sunday, when I told him that he acts like the things that he does doesn't affect the people around him, regarding a lot of things that are going on in the background that I can't speak about right now, he said, "What? Because I made a decision?" And I'm like, "No, everything you do affects people. Everything you've done to me in my childhood still affects me to this day." And he said, "What? Because I grabbed your hair as a kid, so what?" That was my it wasn't my last straw. I'll tell y'all about my last straw in the next video that I talk about this, but I'm done. I am done. My dad almost died a couple years ago. He was having heart troubles and didn't know. And at one point when he finally went to the cardiologist and they did scans, I guess. I think they did the MRI with contrast, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, they found out that his heart was blocked 90, 90, and 95%, if I'm not mistaken, with 3 of his arteries in his heart. He had to have stents put in. For about maybe 6 weeks after, he was a different person. And I think it was because the cardiologist literally told him, like, "Bro, this is what we call the widow's heart, because most men who have this do not survive." And my dad came out with literally not one speck of damage to his arteries. But he turned out to be different for like 6 weeks. It was like he appreciated life. He appreciated us. He appreciated me for helping to nurse him back to health. He was so nice. He was affectionate. And then after that, he just changed back to being who he was before. This really cold, nonchalant, uncaring person. I remember I went to therapy a little over a year ago because I wanted to talk to somebody who wasn't a friend or a family member. And I remember talking to her about some of this stuff. And she literally told me then that I needed to stop trying with my dad. That you can't have a functional relationship with somebody who's dysfunctional and who doesn't even see the dysfunction. Because there's been so many times where I talked to my dad and tried to mend our relationship and literally told him, "I just want to mend our relationship." And he What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with our relationship. There's never been anything wrong with our relationship. But then in the same breath, he can say, you know, you just was different after your sister born. Or he'll be like, you just never talk to me. Everybody else's kids can talk to me, my nieces, my nephews, my friends' children, but you just never talk to me. And it's like, but how can you say that, but then in the same breath say that we've never had an issue in our relationship? That does not make sense. But yeah, she told me to stop trying then, and I kept trying like a dummy. And I remember I tried to go back to her like a week later, and I haven't been able to get in touch with her. After like a month, I just stopped trying, and it was just crazy because it just brought back all my childhood abandonment issues all over again. But it's really affected me. My lack of relationship with my dad has really affected me. And I feel like, and I don't know if this will be true, but sometimes I just feel like no relationship is better than a toxic one. You know, I have friends who didn't grow up with their dad at all, or didn't grow up with their mom at all. Most of them, their dad. And they have daddy issues. They're affected by it. And sometimes I just feel like, and this is not to diminish them at all, because they have their own bouts. But sometimes I just feel like, again, no relationship is better than a toxic one, because it's hard to heal from somebody who's still causing you grief every day with fake interactions or lying about situations that have happened. It's like trying to close a wound, but somebody's still nicking at you constantly. It's affected the way that I view relationships. You guys, I spend the majority of my time single. My longest relationship, I think, is 14 to 16 months, somewhere in there. I've been engaged twice. I walked away both times. I think of all my official relationships, like we were boyfriend and girlfriend, I think I've only been walked away from once, and that person tried to come back like months later. But I walked away from every relationship. I don't have a type. I've never dated like people who were the same personality wise, or people who look the same. But what I can say is, in hindsight, I purposely chose people that I knew it wouldn't work out with, because in reality, I didn't want a long-term relationship, because I didn't know what that looked like with a male, because I did not have that with my dad. I never had a desire to be married. You know, every now and then it would just be like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, because that was like the norm. But I used to, like, when we were kids and we would play house, I wanted to be the single mom. My light just went out. Let me put my ring light on. But yeah, when we used to play house growing up, I wanted to be the single mom. I would tell my parents growing up that, like, you're going to be grandparents of test tube babies, because I want the baby and not the man. And probably speaking that over my life for so long is probably why I'm single at almost 30 years old. I'm trying to really change the narrative. And honestly, after things that have happened over the last couple of months, man, my trust in relationships is almost completely gone. My desire to be in one is almost completely gone as well. And I've never been the type of person that really is like wanted to be in, like, I've never been that person. I'm a loner. I've been a loner most of my life because, again, I was kind of like emotionally and mentally abandoned and neglected. So I spent a lot of time alone. I don't trust a man to take care of my feelings and emotions and protect them, because my dad didn't. I can say that I do kind of have like a very nonchalant, I don't care attitude at times. And I think that's a protective mechanism, because it was like the only way for me to not be depressed all the time, not cry all the time, was for me to not care about my situation. But I'm a very loving and caring person. I can be affectionate. It would take a very special person to bring out that side of me permanently. But I just always been the type of person where I just yearned for companionship, period. Whether it was friends, family, it didn't have to be in a relationship form. And at this point, I still just don't know. I want to be a mom one day. For a long time, I was told that I wouldn't be able to have kids. I'm pretty sure I can now. I've reversed a lot of that. But sometimes I think about not wanting to have children, because it's like, on one hand, I only want to have one kid, because what if I have multiple children and I accidentally do to my kids what my dad did to me? You know, spending all of my time with that one kid, all of my affection with that one kid, and then I screw up my other kid mentally and emotionally. But then I don't only want one kid, because if something happens to me, they don't have a sibling that can help them get through it, you know? And then I always just feel like I've always wanted 3 children. But as I age, as I get older, as I continue on in life, not having a relationship and all of that, it's like I'm at the point where I don't know if that's in my cards. I don't know if marriage is in my cards. I don't know if a long-term relationship is in my cards. I don't know if children are in my cards. I don't know anything. The only thing I know at this point is that I just want to heal. And I feel like the only way for me to heal was to dead the relationship with my dad. Because when you're dealing with somebody who refuses to take responsibility for their actions, for the things that they have said, for the things that they have done, for the ways that they have affected you, even if they didn't attempt to, which, as I said, based on his actions on Sunday, I think everything he did consciously. And at this point, an apology would literally mean nothing. It would take a miracle for me to ever want a relationship with him again. Period. If I have children, I don't know if I would want them to know him, because I don't want them to have to be emotionally neglected, or have this push and pull with him that I had. And I just feel like as a mother, it's my job to protect my children. And if I have to protect them from what I went through, then I will do that. If I do get married, I don't want him to be there. I don't want him to walk me down the aisle. I don't want any of that, because I don't feel like he deserves it. I don't feel like anybody who's hurt me in that manner, who can say so what to the things that they have done, and seeing how it made me feel, and telling me that I'm crying fake tears and they don't care about my fake tears or my fake cries. I don't think that type of person deserves to be in my life, father or not. Because I just live my life feeling like I only have one life to live. And if you're causing havoc and toxicity and causing me to feel bad about myself, feel less than, feel depressed or anything, you shouldn't be in my life. Parent, grandparent, whoever. I'm a great person. I don't bother anybody. You know, I don't go around hurting people. I don't do any of that. So I just feel like if you can't give me what I give you, what's the point? Why do you deserve better than what you're giving me? You don't. And that's that. There were other things that happened growing up, but those were like the biggest things that I feel like affected me the most, affected how I felt about myself the most. affected how I am as a person the most, affected how I view relationships and how I view men the most. And it just really sucks, because I just feel like your home is supposed to be your comfort place, your place of serenity and comfort. And that was not it for me. My dad even said a couple of years ago, I remember we were out eating crab legs at the casino, and my mother's sister said, oh, if you were my daughter's something, something, something. I forgot what we were talking about. And I remember saying, girl, if you was my mom, I would have ran away. And my dad said, you have run away. Every single time you moved out of town, you ran away. And for a long time, I was just like, what is he talking about? But it was reality. Every time I just started to feel so bad about myself and depressed and wanting to kill myself all over again, I just moved. Suddenly. No plan, really, no nothing. I just moved. And it was because I knew that if I moved away, I wouldn't have to deal with my parents, specifically my dad. But at the time, my mom did cause a little bit of issues. But again, it wasn't anything drastic. We talked it out, everything. Me and my mom are good. My mom is not a monster. She's one of the most caring, loving people you will ever meet in your life. Things she did was unconsciously. Things that affected me, she did unconsciously. And again, she's changed her behavior. My dad, no. He doesn't give a damn about nobody but himself. And I'm just tired of helping him to uphold this image that he's father of the year and husband of the year and person of the year, because he's not. He's not. He doesn't give a damn. And quite frankly, I don't either. I'm done. It's over with. And that's that. And I encourage you guys, and I'm not encouraging people to like cut off relationships with their parents, but if you are somebody who's having a toxic relationship, listen, we have one life to live. And if that person is affecting you that much, maybe it's best that you put boundaries up to where they no longer will have that effect on you. Because in the end, I'm not going to regret anything. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. And I've tried. But when somebody shows you who they are, believe them.